meeting is being recorded.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar hosted by the Cyber Hut in conjunction with Monokee, taking a look at the exciting world of visual orchestration, what it is and is it the key to next generation identity and access management. We've got a fabulous topic to dig into today. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started into today's webinar. Clearly we are on Zoom today, which means everybody is centrally muted and cameras off, unfortunately. But we do have, of course, the Q&A functionality and chat functionality available. So do feel free to use that as we go through today's webinar and provide us with comments and questions as we progress. We'll also have 5 or 10 minutes at the end as well to wrap up any additional questions that you may have. So hopefully we can get all of the information you need today. Today's session is being recorded, which means it will be accessible on demand after the event, and we'll provide a link to that to those who've attended, and of course to those who have not attended as well. So that is there for the future. But let us get started today. My name is Simon Moffatt. I'm founder of the Cyber Hut, and today we've got a wonderful guest of Mattia Zago from Monokee joining with us to deep dive into the world of visual orchestration, which is a fascinating topic which I've been tracking for quite a while. I guess a couple of quick introductions. For those who don't know, the Cyber Hut is a boutique industry analyst and advisory firm based out of the UK, but with a global client base. And we track all of the emerging trends within the broader identity and access management space. We do that through a range of different resources. We have an IAM tracker, we have an IAM radar delivering continual comments and analysis across emerging technology trends, as well as our podcast, which we release 2 or 3 times every month. And we essentially deliver a load of research, advisory and training services to the broader ecosystem, looking at trends such as orchestration, authentication, authorization. So it's fascinating to be tracking some of the global trends that are impacting us all. And today, special guest, Mattia Zago from Monokee. Mattia, how are we doing? Welcome.
Thank you, Simon, for having me here today and representing Monokee. And for those in the audience, I'm Mattia, and I've been working in research since basically ever. I mean, since the beginning of my PhD. And my background is in cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. So today, I'm hoping that they can help you go through the innovative side of the orchestration and the way that we look at it for simplifying cybersecurity engineering lives.
Fantastic. Well, that's a superb background. I think we'll dig into this in some detail over the next sort of 40 minutes or so. So great to have you here with us today. And I guess today's agenda, a little bit of a journey, if you like. We're going to sort of start off the conversation really just grounding ourselves really in understanding the terminology around orchestration and how it applies specifically to the identity and access management world, and then really start to look into the benefits, really the problems of disorder, the enemy of security and operational management, really, and the complexities of identity which many organizations face, and how that can be overcome through orchestration, automation and such. And then we're going to dive into the requirements and what essentially makes a good platform in this space, and obviously some really interesting use cases, integrations, and a demo as well. We always like to have a bit of a live technology demo towards the end, which is absolutely super. So hopefully by the end of the next 45 minutes, we'll have a real good grounding in what this technology can deliver to the modern enterprise. But I guess I want to start off a little bit by looking at the past maybe 3, 4, 5 years and the rise of the word essentially of orchestration and how it's specific to identity for our conversations today, but it really does have an application across different parts of the technology ecosystem as well. But we've certainly started to see orchestration arrive in the authorization space within things like brokering systems in both decentralized and centralized identity. I think it seems like it's here to stay, Mattia. Do you think orchestration is definitely something which is now, it's a common part of the, the modern enterprise?
Indeed, I mean, orchestration is nothing new in the sense that it's well known in the academy, in the cloud environment. I mean, it indicates all those techniques, that makes the services that dynamic that we expect them today, And it's nice to see that finally also this sector of the industry is actually recognizing it and try to apply those mechanisms to what we already have. And I think that here the key would be, what do you think are the drivers for this adoption? I mean, why now?
I think that's a really good point. I think identity has become such a, I think such an important part of the organization, really, from both a security angle and the usability side as well. And I think we'll probably maybe touch on that today. Is really it is foundational to delivering business services, to delivering personalization, privacy, consumer
Correct.
identity, perhaps as well. But equally, it has to be done in a secure way, which is automated and repeatable and so on. So I think I always like to look at the drivers here, and I think the importance of identity now is, I think, fortunately for us all as practitioners, it's becoming that higher level conversation. I remember when I sort of started 20 odd years ago, identity was, it was siloed. It was, the infrastructure was fragmented. You had an LDAP in one department. You'd have another LDAP looking after another group of users elsewhere. There was lots of poor visibility issues, data silo problems. But clearly, sort of where we are now, so 2018 to maybe a year or two in the future, I think we are definitely seeing, aren't we, identity being foundational to the business to enable it to share data, sell more services, interact with partners, etc. But it is foundational to security too, isn't it? And I think those two things combined, I think that is pushing us to something around identity centric security is quite popular.
Mhm.
Consumer identity and usability is popular. We'll touch a little bit maybe on decentralized identity as well, a little bit today as well. So I think that those two things really are driving us towards a new infrastructure, a new demand for technology reliant on identity. And I think certainly orchestration has a huge part to play there. Do you think?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, don't forget about the zero trust. I mean, the whole
Yeah.
foundation of zero trust is the fact that everything needs to be authenticated and authorized to access practically everything. So if you were to ask me where are we headed, I think that the clear is, I mean, the trend is pretty much clear. It's straightforward. Although in our opinion, I mean, both mine and of course of Monokee, is to split between what the citizens will require and what the workforce will demand, okay? Because regulation will be different, and decentralization might apply a part in the citizen side of it, let's say the CIAM, for example, with selective disclosures, zero knowledge proofs, and decentralized identities, but regulation will still be there for
Mm.
enterprises to trace and audit. So perhaps we will see two different trends from now on, where we adopt a technology without actually giving out every bit of control in our, let's say, ecosystems.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's definitely the conflict between, I guess, privacy and
Mm.
personalization, maybe security and usability. But I do think as well that subtle difference between customers and employees, and then
Mhm.
all of the other identity types as well, which we'll may cover as we progress. And the other thing I wanted to bring in, just it probably wouldn't be a modern webinar without mentioning AI or Chat GPT in some way, shape, or form. And this is a bit funny, I guess, but I actually have leveraged Chat GPT and asked it, what is identity orchestration and the benefits, and it came out with a fabulous set of answers. Really, I mean, maybe 2 years ago, it wouldn't have been able to do that. But it's essentially come back, and I don't want to read all this stuff, but I guess the highlighted angles there in sort of greeny colors there, talking about managing and coordinating complex identity ecosystems. So that's seems quite valid. Synchronization of information. Benefits looking to reduce complexity, streamline processes, maybe consolidate, ensure consistency, security, and efficiency. Okay, yes, these are quite generic terms from an AI engine, but I think it does amplify the real power of identity and the need to have improvements in productivity, reductions in manual effort, and looking to automate, looking to pull in different data sources across authentication, authorization, context, risk, etc. And I think it's, I don't know. Do you have any comments on AI as an AI specialist? I guess, but I was surprised. I think it's a good thing.
I mean, it's great. We all know that these models actually learn from what we write on the internet. You know? So the fact that this model is aware of identity orchestration means that we are finally looking at something that's relevant. Okay, and the fact that the orchestration is what makes system dynamic and adaptable to other sources. I think here there are a couple of keywords that you have highlighted that are really, really interesting. Besides the increased productivity, which might or not be the case here, but security, efficiency, and being able to manage complex situations and streamline the processes. Those are the keywords that we actually want to achieve, okay, in our systems. And AI could definitely help us with or without language models.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, isn't it? I think, yes, a lot of organizations are jumping on the AI angle. It's large language, you've got generative, and then that will all, I guess, mature over the next sort of 3 or 4 years, I guess. But I think clearly from our conversation today, it is showing there's maturity here and there's huge benefits. I think being a dominant player like yourselves in this space is just really showing value exists to the modern
Correct.
enterprise, because they are, if you try to do a lot of this stuff by hand, manual process, silo technology, you will not reap those benefits. I think it's interesting that you know, I guess as analysts and as vendors, I guess we don't have to always educate. I think that now organizations are catching up and realizing they need newer platforms to deliver some of those services as well, which I think is exciting. Another quick little couple of slides here on the sort of background, and this was a bit of research we did sort of April time. And this is just a generic keyword search of 579 companies in Crunchbase, in the big business sort of directory there online. And this was pulling out the descriptions of the companies and looking at keyword analytics where the word orchestration may have appeared. So this is looking at general technology platforms, whether it's in networking, infrastructure, etc. And there's some interesting bolds here that I guess we can pull out, things like platform, you know, looking at delivering more than one set of services within a particular area. Clearly identities we're familiar with, but resources and knowledge and reuse of technology seems to be a real either a driver or benefit, I guess, of orchestration. Things like cloud as well. You know, organizations really facing this landscape of having multi-cloud or this hybrid cloud ecosystem where not just delivering everything as a SaaS. It could be on-premise, private cloud, maybe some virtual machines, maybe a bit of bare metal still, maybe some HP and Dell hardware, perhaps, I don't know. But it isn't all black and white, is it? There's definitely that flexibility there in that. I guess, is that something you guys see as well, I would have thought?
Well, it depends in the sense that, as I said, everything is dynamic today, you know, everything needs to be flexible, anything needs to be adaptable. So I think that the keyword here is hybrid. I mean, everything today is hybrid. You can do whatever you want, however you want. How to coordinate that, that's a real deal. Okay, so that's the real deal. And I think that what's missing here is the keyword of strategy. And I think that we come back later on that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. The hybrid one, and it applies to the next one here is data. I think that hybrid, in the sense of there's more different types of cloud deployment, but also things like data, you know, where the data resides, where it's coming from, on-prem, off-prem, the fog, edge. You've got an amalgamation of data there, and obviously that needs to be wrapped with things like privacy and so on. So we're just seeing orchestration appear in different technology areas, and clearly identity is no different. I think double clicking now into today's ecosystem and also in today's webinar, really understanding the benefits and what IAM orchestration looks like. This is a great slide. I like this slide. This is this is amplifying what things may look like if you had no orchestration. So clearly, we've all probably got these scars and the war stories to go along with stories similar to this. I remember starting my career off as sort of 21, 22-year-old, having to work in server rooms like this and just be not wanting to touch anything. And I think we've all got stories here. And clearly, disorder here is the enemy of, I think, not just security, but good operations, good management, good visibility, good hygiene, the ability to be agile. Very difficult to add in a new server and port and everything in that diagram. And I think if we take this sort of mental image and apply it to the identity world, some organizations see something similar, and I guess the tentacles and the wires here, I guess, could be resembling this, where the left-hand side we have more and more identities, haven't we? We've got more volume of identity,
Mhm.
more identity types, and there's probably more to be added here. You know, we talk about workforce identity, but there's consumer identity within workforce. There are partners, there's gig economy, there are temporary workers, there are contractors, and then somehow on the right hand side we need to make the journey from being red and untrusted to being green and relatively trusted. You know, trust but verify, I guess, if we're sort of following the zero trust approach, but something more trusted, where they can access documents, data, APIs, perform transactions, make purchases, access spreadsheets and documents, etc. So we have this journey for identity, and somehow in the middle we have all of this stuff which has to be managed, has to be augmented with context and risk and adaptability. But obviously that has to be operating effectively. I think this is now where we start to see the potential disorder, isn't it, if we don't get
Mhm.
this stuff right.
Indeed, I mean, the situation, to be fair, without anything to control and to audit these processes, is oriented toward getting out of control, and there's no denying it. There are too many factors, too many variables, too many elements that may or may not play a part in this process. And the idea here is to have strategies to approach and tackle these problems one step at a time. I mean, you can have an engineer here designing something that says, you know, you are an employee of class A, then you can do single sign-on via whatever protocol you want and access those files. That's fine. I mean, it works. You can do it. But what about when you have tens of thousands of employees and perhaps millions of groups? That's simply not going to work. Okay. And then what if you acquire a new company? What if you have to change and integrate their own strategies within your own system? And then that's where policies came in. You align the policies and everything works. But the future perhaps toward the autonomic side, where you have AI model, going back to ChatGPT, that actually can understand the situation and the context and decide if something is perhaps simply an anomaly, or could actually be synonym of something different, or symptom of, I don't know, perhaps an attack or a cyber criminal infiltrating the network. So the idea here is we need tooling and softwares that goes a little bit beyond the classic governance to shed light and actually identify which strings goes from where to where. Okay. And that's where orchestration will come in.
Yeah, I think that's a fabulous description, and you're absolutely right. There's more things. There are more
Correct.
decisions to be made. There's more data points. There are more things to be gain access to. Of course, from an adversary's perspective, they have more things that they can target. There's a big sort of emerging industry around threat intelligence, identity threat detection, and really looking at all of the different angles which an adversary could target. And again, it's slightly orthogonal, I guess, but the more things we have, the bigger the attack surface, and ergo, you need to have that automated, streamlined, as much orchestration in there as possible, leveraging the right data points at the right time. And I think the other thing to add is the benefits to the business here as well are significant. It isn't always about security, but it's about enabling the business to fulfill its process better, deliver services better, share data better. All of these things which can help the business complete something which has a more sort of strategic direction, which I think is really powerful.
Indeed. I
Um,
mean, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go
No,
ahead.
the idea here is that collecting data is actually easy. Getting
Mm,
another data point is easy. What we do with those data and how we analyze them and which conclusion do we draw from that, that's where the human intelligence is still prevalent and predominant. And we need to make sure that those let's say great individuals that actually can understand the situation are in place and have the tooling and the instruments to make sure that their decisions are actually in place and can be applied in every context and every situation. And that's where we can be one step forward in comparison with the classic attackers. Okay.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it's the more data we have is great, but we need to be able to act upon that and, and
Correct.
more importantly, respond effectively as well if we do identify something erroneous. I want to touch a little bit and get your take here on the requirements. Clearly, it sounds like we know it's a good thing. The industry is developing. We know if Chat GPT knows about it, it's got to be good, right? So let's double click in some of these requirements. I think there's a couple here which are really fascinating. I think clearly from a UX perspective, user experience perspective, a lot of focus happens to the end user, making sure the end user is happy, they can complete a task effectively, they can do it efficiently and in a way which they don't have to get help from a help desk or a manual or whatever. So that's good. And I think as an industry, we've made good strides there. But the administration user experience as well, I think there's a huge benefit from orchestration. What's your view there?
Indeed, I mean, connecting to my previous point, if an administrator or security engineer cannot really understand what they're doing or cannot anticipate potential flaws in their reasoning, then there's actually no value there because they will be introducing vulnerabilities and logic vulnerabilities that can be exploited, not because the software is unpatched, but just because they find a different path to achieve the criminal results. So the security engineer must use the tooling, and we need to provide them with the right tool, and the UX must be something that they feel comfortable to work with.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on. And I guess back to the previous slide, the more things the administrator has to worry about, more
Correct.
integrations, more decisions to make, they will invariably either make mistakes or it will end up being the sort of repeating the same mistake over and over again, which I think is a big deal. And the paper to production is another good one. I think organizations that they want to move fast, that they want to deliver applications and business services faster than ever before, whether that's competitive pressures, whether that's operating in an agile ecosystem due to maybe the unknowns that they are facing. But paper to production, draft to craft, getting stuff live faster seems a huge benefit to everybody.
It is, and an enabled technology to do that is actually the codeless, the only configuration of the tooling. So we have everything like in a Lego system. We have all the different blocks. We just need to combine them to create
Mm,
the information. And also here, there's the keyword of the integration flexibility that you put there, which in our opinion, is just another reflection of the codeless and the two enabling keys to get from paper to production, from draft to craft, And the idea here is being so flexible, everything configurable. It's nice, definitely.
mm.
But what if the new integration are just going to hinder the security rather than actually improving it? And there where the analysis and notability comes in. So performing a penetration test after the flows, after the implementation is fine. It's nice. It's one of the ways we identified vulnerabilities. But what if we have it designed in such a way that we can actually identify flaws because they're logic flaws or architectural flaws before they even go in production? That would be marvelous, right?
I think that's a really spot on thing. I think there's a huge, as you say, a subtle difference between the penetration testing happening after you've designed a system. Some of these systems are going to be complicated. There's lots of flows involved, lots of happy paths and sad paths. You
Mhm.
want to analyze that before the thing goes live and it's been live 2, 3, 4 months, and you have an external test, and suddenly you have to re-engineer. Having that during the analysis phase, during the development of your user journeys, being able to iterate, get the feedback, and analyze those paths, I think is hugely valuable. And it allows both the application owner and the identity owner to see where they can make improvements and do it live, do it before you're having to deploy something. I think is always a very, very powerful aspect. And I guess one thing I think is important as well is when we, I guess, see the demo soon, we're talking about something very visual, very easy for non-technical people to understand, not only just the individual steps, but the entire journey and the changes to this journey. I think that's where stakeholder accessibility, being able to show orchestration to an application owner, a line manager, a non-technical guy or girl, essentially, which I think is quite new to the identity space. I think we're all very good at standards and tech and OAuth2 and OpenID Connect and stuff, but we need to broaden identity, don't we, into different people, and get them involved in the design phase and looking at the identity canvas and looking at the different flows. I think that's another benefit, I think.
I mean, just going back to the picture before of the cabinets, you can do that with code today. I mean, you can have the library with perhaps, I don't know, 1 million line of code or 10 millions of them, because it's a library that performs absolutely everything. And we can analyze that statically, we can analyze that dynamically, but there's no way we're going to explain to our lawyers that actually that piece of code performs what they are supposed to do, and there are no other connections. While if we find a way to divide it and implement a single atomic operation and say, okay, this operation is from A to B, full stop, and this operation is from C to D, and then connect them, and we show that there's only that path that leads from state A to state B, then we can get them on board just by showing them that the steps performed are like finite, and the states change according to rules and specific decision that we can explain to them. So if you're getting rejected or if you're getting accepted to access to, for example, access a file or resource, then we can say, yeah, you got there because of this and that condition. Okay. Yeah. And that's something that specifically non-technical people or people that don't have, perhaps they have a technical background, but they're not up to speed with whatever little detail in the technology we have at the moment, can still understand and find out if there's something that's not correct or if they can certify what we have. Okay, so I think that this accessibility is what actually works today, makes it so important to push on orchestration.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating point. Fascinating point. Let's click on a little bit. I want to sort of touch on a few real world, I guess, applications of what we've been talking about and some of those benefits. We've got sort of three main sort of categories here and a few use cases to discuss before handing over to a demo. I don't want to go through every single area here, but I guess the three sort of big areas that we hear the Cyber Hut from an inquiry perspective is organizations want to consolidate identity infrastructure, whether that's the identity provider layer, the MFA layer, the authorization level. Everybody in the world wants to somehow reduce risk. Unfortunately, they want to do it yesterday and they want to do it for free. But alas, we all are aware of risk. But people are starting to think they want to move to the next generation, that they want to remove the middleware, the complicated identity infrastructure from the last 15, 20 years and look to the future now, looking to decentralized capabilities, verified credentials, integrating and embedding risk further. So these three pillars, I guess, are certainly something we get involved a lot in from an inquiry perspective. And I just want to pull out one or two particular use cases and then hand over to yourself for a bit of a demo. But I guess from a consolidation perspective, I think there are two main ones, aren't there? Really, is the consolidation of that IDP, the identity provider infrastructure, into something more streamlined, leverage improved operational cost, maybe leveraging going from an on-prem to a cloud, or just consolidating. And the MFA one, it's another one, isn't it? Trying to remove and reduce how many multi-factor authentication options. We did some research a few months ago. I think the average number is 5 MFA tools for the medium-sized enterprise. But yeah, I mean, these seem like powerful use cases that we can hopefully fulfill in orchestration world. Is that fair?
Indeed, what I'm worried about is most of the companies that are around today are not starting from scratch. They're getting a huge backlog of technologies that are legacy today and perhaps even obsolete. So what if you started, I don't know, 20 years ago and you have accumulated 20 years of different strata, okay?
Yeah.
And each one of them is now to be consolidated in something new, because you know that you're going to be way less expensive, for example, if you're going to optimize everything. But where actually do you start? And this is something that we're going to see in the demo.
Yeah, super duper. A risk perspective, I think the big takeaway from risk for me, I mean, clearly identity people are involved, security people are involved. You could probably extend that to maybe audit and others as well. But they want to analyze more stuff, don't they? They want to integrate non-identity information into the identity journeys. And this could be anything from IP addresses, device characteristics, risk, breach credentials information. But the more information we have, the better decisions we can make, and clearly being able to apply specific controls or just more fine-grained responses. To be able to do that, we need more information, don't we? We need to have more data at our fingertips.
And again, more data without the ways or the means to actually analyze it, of course, it won't lead to anything. So in the demo, we are going to see how to include this information and extrapolate data from it and reuse it according to whatever tooling we want.
Super, excellent stuff. And the last one, I guess, I mean, those two buckets, if you like, really are sort of part of a bigger journey, isn't it? Really, all around migrating to something new. And identity often in the past was riddled with complex consultancy and very difficult and expensive to replace essentially the wiring within those organizations. But I think now today we are looking to, migrate, modernize access control, collapse MFA into a consistent solution, leverage risk, pull in third-party signals, more control over data. If we're talking about things like verified credentials and in that decentralized ecosystem, how do we get there in a simple way? So I think all organizations that we speak to, they want to move to something different. Combine security, usability, privacy, personalization in a central platform. And I think orchestration will help organizations pull in those different data points and allow them to overlay and move towards something better.
And the key here again is migration. I mean, imagine to be, as I said before, an IT administrator that has, I don't know, 20 years of backlog, really, and different softwares that you need to combine, and then you want to migrate something new. With the orchestration, what you can do is provide means for the user to do the job themselves without ever knowing it. So for example, the first time they access the new system, there will be automatically just-in-time provision to it. And there's no need to actually disconnect the previous system up until everything is transferred to the other one. Or you don't even need to change the applications and the services because they are already connected to the orchestration platform, and they will decide who actually is the actor that is talking to it. And that's something that I'm going to actually show in the demo, how to change one block in favor of another without actually modifying the services and the third-party tooling that perhaps integrates with our own.
I think that rip and replace aspect is something many organizations, they fear, don't they? They fear the huge cost, the impact, the physical cost, the consultancy cost. Whereas, as you say, if you can overlay on top and augment and expand without having to destroy, I think is very powerful. Okay, let me stop sharing my PowerPoints for the time being and pass the button across to you.
I will start sharing. You should be able to see it now.
Yeah, perfect. I can see that.
Amazing. So what I'm going to show you now is basically a live view of Monokee. And this is our visual identity orchestrator, and the visual identity orchestrator is our way to go from draft to craft. Okay, so imagine it as if it were a whiteboard. Okay, so classic and simple whiteboard. You take blocks, you drag them, you drop them somewhere else, you connect it, you put arrows in there, you put comments eventually. And the idea is that everything here is a finite state machine that can be executed by the software itself. So we have a system behind it that interprets everything and execute the flow. So the user actually never see anything unless we want them to. So let's say that this is the first use case for the classic consolidation. And we're going to start with something that is perhaps familiar with many of us. You have a user that lands on our system and want to access an application, and we're going to split these phases by before asking for credentials. So classic username and password, please input your username and password, let's validate it. And we validate it using an LDAP provider. Perhaps it is installed into our own environment, so on-prem, and we just need to configure the LDAP in order to connect to that. So we do not care about which system we are actually accessing to, because the protocol, the final protocol, the identity is packaged for that protocol at the end of the flow when we have identified and authorized the user. So let's say that we get the information and we save them in variables, and then we're going to say, okay, but since I need, for compliance reason, to ask you for a multi-factor authentication, I'm just going to send you an email, okay? So I'm generating a random code and sending you an email, and then requesting it again to, let's say, verify that the code you have added, it's something like, I don't know, insert your verification code you receive on the email, and then click on validate. And then we check that that code that is the same that we shared with you at the beginning. And then if it's, of course, it's invalid, it's invalid. But if it's valid, then we can craft the user session. We put every data that we need into this ephemeral session, for example, the username, the display, and the email that we got from the LDAP. And then we use it to access the final system. So the package of the identity in the session is crafted in such a way that is compatible with any particular application. So if you want XML, that's fine. If you want it with OpenID Connect, that's also fine. The user attributes are actually in the session and only lives during the session, okay? So we were talking about the consolidation and, for example, moving to cloud or moving to hybrid systems. Well, what could be interesting is to actually swap out the LDAP with something like a modern solution in a cloud, perhaps Monokee, or it can be Azure, or it can be any system. So instead of actually logging into the LDAP, we are going to simply move it and log in with the new provider. And if the user is not there, well, perhaps we can just authenticate it to the LDAP. And if the user existed in the previous one, but not in the new one, well, we can just create it and provision it automatically and just in time at that moment. And when the user is created, I see no reason for us to not log back in and then continue with the classic flow that the user has. So at this point for the user, everything is completely transparent. But what I've done behind the scene is automatically provision on every access. If the user is not in the new one, in the new system, then I will take the information from the previous one, configure it in the new one, and then authenticate them. But from the second step, from the second time of the login, they will directly log in with the first, with the new system. So I can dismantle the first one gradually, okay? And perhaps here, let's say that I have finally removed the LDAP because I've checked and every user has been moved and every account has been moved. So I don't even need to create them anymore. So I authenticate everything from the cloud provider. Then I say, okay, next step, you know what? We don't want to ask for MFA anymore. We don't want to ask for TOTP or HOTP. And we're going to perhaps take something like, I don't know, a FIDO passkey, something that will enable us to avoid requesting for codes, and we just use, I don't know, perhaps a mobile passkey on your Android or iPhone or a Windows Hello or whatever other system supports passkeys. So rather than going for email MFA, we're just going to FIDO credentials. And then if everything is fine, then we just go to create the attribute as before. And what we need to do here is just change the configuration, because of course the variables won't be these anymore. They will be different because we will take them from a different identity provider. But at the end, this step will automatically change the user experience, but also the experience of the administrators. Because in this way, I can design what option do I have, when do I want them to deploy. And of course, I can add the conditionals and other elements practically everywhere. So let's say that we are in a final condition where we have the request credentials, then you have the Monokee authenticated user, and then you verify the FIDO credentials, and then you check, of course, if the credential provided from FIDO are actually the ones that you are expecting from the user. And if that's the case, then you authenticate. But how now we do interact with other systems? Because the second use case that we are talking about is about introducing other elements and other data points in order to act upon them. So far, it's everything static. I mean, you either are authenticated or not when you land on the system. And if you're not authenticated, I'm going to ask you credentials. But if you're already authenticated, then there's no need for it. But perhaps I am required to always ask you for a verification. So I'm just going to send you to FIDO. What if this can change in order to get more information from the users? What we can do, for example, is to add something different, perhaps something that we have designed in a second time, and we have our team test and start to operate without the user know. For example, after login, we can say, okay, let's connect to a procedure that we have saved in our library in a nested way, and let's start to gather information, okay? So simply gather information. We created the data set that established the baseline for our users. So at this point, we can collect all the information. And then, what about then? Then we can perform some strategies and apply strategies to actually act upon this data. So perhaps if I gather the information about, for example, the device fingerprinting or the IP addresses or the geolocation of the browser, or for example, the same geolocation of the IP address, and then I compare them, I can set this value, these constants, and save them before actually performing the access. But later on, what I can do is say, okay, you know what, you're already authenticated because you have a session, you have a token, you have something that I can use to authenticate you. What about I'm reanalyzing the context, getting the information to my backend, and my system, whether AI, policy-based or human design, will then send me back a result. And then in the orchestration platform, I decide how to act upon that result. So if your backend API, which has this new, incredible, marvelous AI model, decides that this information is inconsistent with what you do and what you want to access, then I would just say, yeah, no, you need to re-authenticate. And perhaps based on that decision, then I can show them again the verify multi-factor authentication, or simply send them to the final resource independently, you know, while for the users that are not authenticated, I'm just performing exactly the same as before. And it's just a matter of configuring the blocks and decide what they should do. And I'm pretty sure that if I'm showing something like this to a legal team or to a department that is not composed mainly of technical people, they can understand that the only way to reach from start to end is by traveling through the system. And provided that each atomic operation is secure, then I can certify that everything goes fine and there won't be any particular issues. So the idea is that how then we can leverage this information to go to, for example, decentralization. I mean, let's say that I don't want to use FIDO or I don't want to use the credentials. What I can do is, much like as before, include a library that has been designed for me to, for example, use MetaMask in order to use verifiable credentials. So you use your decentralized wallet to log in with the functionalities, you know. So if you're not authenticated, I'm just going to ask you for the credentials. And when you send me the credential, I will analyze them and then send you directly to analyzing the session context. Okay. So perhaps what I can hide within one single block is actually a series of scripts and functionalities that will permit me to create and adapt to future technology without actually having to change much in what's my real flow that the user is executing. Okay, so I would say that this is a brief, I mean, in 5 minutes, that's the best I can do to show the flexibility of the orchestration capabilities and the orchestration platform, in the sense of let's make it easier for system integrators and for security engineers to design something, to prototype something, and to ship it in production. And of course, you will need to create these blocks and to configure them, and you will need to understand what you are actually doing. But that's much easier and much quicker than actually implementing every single step of the process by coding. Okay, so I would guess that this will send it back to you, Simon, and perhaps 2 questions from the audience.
Yeah, fantastic, breathtaking demo. As you're saying, is much crammed in there in sort of 10-15 minutes as possible. I mean, a huge breadth of capabilities here. I think, you know, we've touched a little bit on some of those use cases, but clearly the power here is in the ability to pull in lots of different pieces of data from the identity ecosystem, whether it's centralized, decentralized, things like signaling, device characteristics. And I think it's then allowing that micro decision making, isn't it? I think each of these components obviously has an individual contribution to the overall decision making of, in this case, authentication, for example. So I think that really starts to emerge as a really powerful component. I think historically, authentication specifically was very coarse grained. It was you're logged in or you're not logged in. The credential is valid or it's not valid. Whereas now there's a whole host of different data points we can leverage, and you need a mechanism which is visual to be able to pull together those individual components and have those micro decision points. And that allows you really to make some very complex journeys, I think.
Indeed, and the granularity of having different flows associated to different resources. I mean, today you do perform checks via API gateways, for example. You know, you have some proxies there that intercept the requests and then change them or decides if you can access or not. But when you can associate different flows to different applications, then you have that granularity that enables you to say, okay, to access this interface, you might just need to be authenticated because there's nothing fancy there. But perhaps if you want to access that system, which is critical because you are perhaps a privileged administrator or you are, I don't know, it's something personal or reserved information for the company, then we're going to ask for several steps, much as a step-up authentication system. So, which might or may not lead to getting an explicit approbation and authorization from your manager or from somebody else. I mean, here you're just limited by your imagination and what you want to achieve and which are the security policies that you want to include into these systems.
Super. That's fantastic. Well, thank you, Mattia, for that demo. Let's switch back across and wrap up with a little bit of some questions, I guess, there on the demo side. So I guess let's open it up to questions to the audience. If there are any, now is a good opportunity. Let me open the chat dialogue. Now is a good time to ask any questions around the content or the demo or of either of us. I guess now would be the time to do so. I guess a question there around integrations. So what integrations are possible? I mean, clearly there's a lot of individual components there. So what integrations come out of the box, and how do you extend and expand into different systems? I guess is a good early question to start with.
Well, from our experience, integration is as easy as the number of actual systems that you have already included, or the number of protocols that you're already compatible with. So, for example, if we go to an enterprise or a company that only has SAML applications, that would be like a day's work to change the actual identity provider because they are already aligned. But what if we go to assist to an enterprise with an ecosystem that's absolutely different? Perhaps they have a couple of OpenID Connect applications, they have a couple of SAML applications, and they have a couple of, or perhaps hundreds of legacy applications with their own custom tokens and custom information. When that's a point, given the orchestration nature of the product like this, what you can do is simply separate the steps of identification, authentication, and authorization from how do you actually access the system. Do you need an API gateway? That's fine. Do you need to craft a specific JWT token? Then just drag and drop the block in the specific position, and you will be able to craft that token for that specific application. And the granularity comes into this scenario. But that's also why, for example, Monokee got certified for OpenID Connect, and we got the full certification for the OpenID providers. The point is, we need to be as complete as possible in order to support as many use cases as possible. And I guess that the idea comes precisely from these capabilities, you know.
Yeah, oh, that's a really detailed, really great answer. I guess another sort of practical one from I guess coming from my side is how do organizations get started? You know, where would they look to start on this journey with you guys? What would be that first sort of first application or a first project? How would they look to get started?
Well, definitely something we can do is open a demo tenant, sorry, such that we can put it in cloud, and you will be able to access to a specific domain within the tenant. And then you will start by just providing with either your IDP or your service providers, and then connect it to that, and just shoot us an email, and we will start from that. I mean, if we can get from draft to craft, as we said, it from zero to production is about 20 working days, then you definitely can spend a couple of hours with us, specifically with me in this case, or with our team, to understand how it works and how do you actually go and learn and decide how to solve your issue with this platform.
That's super perfect, and it looks, from a usability perspective, quite easy to get started, I think, as well. Trying to building your own, it seems quite a shallow learning curve. Well, wrapping up towards the end of here, I guess a couple of calls to action. I think that was a really great one to wrap up there. You know, getting started with a demo tenant. There are links there to request a demo directly from yourselves, and we will send out the deck after the event to attendees, so they will get some links. And obviously, from a CyberHub perspective, feel free to reach out to understand more about this type of technology in the industry in general, from inquiry and everything else. But Mattia, great chatting. I've learned a lot around orchestration this last hour or so. So thank you for that. Any last quick comments before we finish up?
No, I just noticed that there's actually another question from the audience
Okay.
about
Yes.
how we are different from Strat Identity Orchestrator. That's a nice question, and I actually invite you to shoot us an email and compare it by your own self, in the sense that we are pretty much up to standards, and we are not shining away from any comparison. So just send us an email, and we will be able to perform the comparison with you directly live. So I guess that will be it, and we have covered all the different elements and information that we had. So again, reach out either on LinkedIn or on our website, or send us an email, and we will be more than happy to follow up with your specific issues, perhaps, or your use cases. Actually, something that we like to do, and we think that it's a proper way, is send us a use case, send us your challenge, send us your issue. For example, I can't do this because I have this situation and that situation. What do you propose? And let's sit for a couple of hours with our engineering team in order to solve your issue, or at least to draft a potential solution that's just one configuration step away from going into production.
It's real and pragmatic. What more do you need to get started?
Correct.
Fabulous. And Mattia, well, excellent. Thank you to all of our listeners and viewers who have tuned in today. Thank you again, Mattia and the Monokee team, for such a wonderful explanation. This has been a fascinating journey through the world of identity orchestration. We will share the recorded video with attendees after the event. But wherever you are in the world, stay safe. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.